Reddit has an endless supply of horrifying stories on just about any topic you can imagine, and today we're going to cover 4 of them. From a woman who made a horrifying discovery after finding a human tooth in her bedroom, to a user whose dog ate their brother. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can become a Ko-fi member or a channel member to gain access to uncut videos and other perks, or you can leave me a tip by clicking the thanks under this video. Thanks to anyone who considers this. This video will cover a range of potentially triggering topics, including brain damage, kidnapping, miscarriage, stalking, and some not safe for work references. Viewer discretion is advised. You can click the link in the description to become a Ko-fi member and watch a longer, uncut and ad-free version of this video, which features a whole extra entry that was unsuitable for this cut. Let's start with a post on the Confession subreddit from a couple of months ago that was titled, "I'm not really human anymore due to permanent brain damage." The title alone honestly gave me chills, and the post itself is even more disturbing. Quote, "I had a serious head injury in 2009. It killed me. Obviously I was brought back. Lots of freaky stuff happened at the time, as one would expect from serious permanent brain damage. I was in hospital for 3 days, not expected to leave alive, but I did. I have permanent amnesia. I lost every personal memory I had. I don't even remember my mother's face. Hell, I didn't even recognize my own face. Anything before 2009 is sketchy at best. It took 5 years to come to terms with the new reality and the realization that I had lost the ability to feel fear due to my amygdala being permanently damaged. I'd lost the emotional connection with my now ex-wife. Losing an emotion has left me feeling that I'm no longer human. A person who can't feel fear is a monster. There are less limits on doing anything, which is not as good as it sounds. Physically I am human, but losing that emotion has made the other emotions I have left heightened. Love is extreme, but so is anger. I take great efforts to avoid hate because I don't know how I could stop it. Anger is almost impossible to come down from. When I am angry, I see red. I can hear the blood rushing in my ears. I feel like I'm going to explode, and it takes an extreme effort to suppress that rage. I will usually sit quietly gripping a desk or squeezing my face until I can get to a level of control. I hide this rage. No one really knows how volatile I can be. I don't want people to be afraid of me, but they would be if they knew. I can't even imagine how terrifying it would be to suddenly develop amnesia to this extent. One day you're living your normal life, and the next you don't even know who you are, let alone your family members. If you're wondering how it happened, OP explained in a comment, quote, "It's a little embarrassing. I was doing something stupid. When I tell people it's a kite accident, people think the kite hit me in the head. I was attempting to fly a stunt kite and I tripped over a large branch and jackknifed the back of my skull into rammed dirt. My brother felt the impact and he was about 20 feet away. I remember everything from that point onwards." It sounds like OP did regain a bit of their memory from before the accident, though not much, as he said anything before 2009 is sketchy at best. And I wonder if that's why his wife is now his ex-wife. He said he lost the emotional connection he had with her, so perhaps he vaguely remembered who she was, but forgot the love he had for her before, which is a really sad thought. It must have been really tough for her too. The way OP talks is like his personality totally changed overnight, so he was no longer the person his wife married. The other major effect he described is losing the ability to feel fear. Now in some ways that might not sound like the worst thing. I know I'd be happier if I suddenly lost my fear of spiders, but losing the ability to fear everything would have pretty major consequences. Fear is generally viewed as a negative emotion, like sadness and anxiety, but there are reasons why we evolved to experience all these emotions. No one enjoys being sad, but would we truly appreciate the times we are happy without the contrast? Anxiety and fear both serve as deterrents that dissuade us from doing things that might cause us harm. Admittedly, they're not always rational, like my fear of harmless house spiders, but it's definitely beneficial to feel fear or anxiety when in a potentially dangerous environment. So imagine if you literally couldn't feel fear in any situation. What's stopping you from blindly walking out into a busy road or starting a fight with someone twice your size? OP's increased anger since the injury would make that even more likely. He specified in a comment that he doesn't fear the consequences of his actions or the repercussions of what he says, and that, combined with anger to the point where he has to isolate himself until he calms down, is a really worrying combination. In another comment, he said, "The way I look at it is that the old me died and something else came back. Going through it, it's incredibly confusing and takes a long time to adjust. I don't really celebrate or be thankful that I'm alive. It cost me a lot. I exist. That's pretty much it." In response to a comment asking if there were any therapy or drug options, he replied, "It's physical damage, there's not much you can do. You do develop strategies, but you can't reduce the strength of the emotions. I cry a lot. I feel too much." I really hope that one day there is some kind of medical advancement that can help OP feel more human again. I don't think he'll ever return to the person he was before. It's not like everything that happened in the last 16 years can just be reversed, but if there will ever be a way to restore his memory from before that, or to give him the ability to feel emotions within a normal range again, at least that would hopefully improve the quality of his life. The title of the next post we'll cover is, "My dog ate my brother and I let it happen." Obviously this is going to be messed up regardless, but it's probably not exactly what you're thinking. Here's the story. Believe me, it's not what it seems. When I was about 8, I dug holes all over the backyard for no damn reason. I remember my mum being pregnant, but I never saw him being brought home. I never met him. One day as I was digging, I found a small wooden box. I opened it expecting some treasure my imagination had led me to believe existed, but inside was a small humanoid beef jerky of a fetus. Thinking back on it, I now know that it was a miscarriage. As I put the box aside and looked around in the hole, I found a note that read, "I will always love you, my sweet child." As I turned around, I saw my dog eating the thing inside the box. I never told my mum and I feel extremely guilty. Sorry if I wrote this terribly, I'm not too good with words. So this is infinitely better than the dog eating OP's living brother, but what an incredibly unfortunate thing to happen. I imagine it would be pretty traumatizing as a child to accidentally dig up your miscarried brother in the first place, but for your dog to then eat him would just be wild. OP provided some more details in an edit, quote, "I want to clarify some things that have been causing people confusion. I'm currently 18, so this was just 10 years ago. I lived in a very shady town really close to the Mexican border, so basically the health system over there is pretty much effed up. As far as I know, she didn't want to throw her child away in a bucket, as she put it. I know this because I've eavesdropped on her while she's talking with her friends. All I know is that it took a really hard toll on my mother when this child died. I know that she sometimes blames me for its death because I was an overdeveloped baby. I was born at nearly 11 months. If my memory serves me right, I was like 20 days late. As a newborn, people thought I had already several months of life already. It wasn't a C-section, so when I was born the natural way, I pretty much moved around her intestines and messed up her womb, I guess. Sometimes I catch her staring at a baby from other families and I can see the sorrow and the emotion reflected in her eyes, and I can't help but feel bad because I feel like I'm responsible that it was miscarried, and I also feel responsible for the fact that my dog had eaten it. Anyways, back on track. From what I know, they told her that the child's heart was not beating. The doctors gave her meds and told her to go home, and then when she did pass it, to go back to the hospital, but she didn't. She didn't want them to throw away her child, and that's basically what I know. The box seemed to be crafted by my father, who's a carpenter. I think anyone in OP's position would feel bad about digging up their miscarried brother and the dog eating it, even though it wasn't intentional. But what makes this so much worse for OP is that they clearly have some kind of complex because they feel it was their fault their mum had a miscarriage. Obviously, it's absolutely not their fault. They never asked to be born in the first place, and they didn't choose the circumstances under which they were born. I'm not a doctor, but I tried to do a bit of research on the likelihood of OP being born late and overdeveloped directly affecting their mum's future pregnancies, and it seems that it's unlikely. It absolutely could have caused problems for the mum during and shortly after giving birth to OP, such as tearing and pelvic floor weakness. But if she healed from the complications at the time, the risk of future miscarriages likely wouldn't be increased. OP doesn't seem to know this though and blames themselves for what happened, and it seems inevitable that that's because of something their mum said at some point. They didn't say in the post that their mum directly told them it was their fault, but clearly enough was said to them that they joined the dots and surmised that their mum thought that, which is really sad. As I said, the circumstances surrounding OP's birth was unlikely to be the cause anyway, but if the mum wanted to place the blame anywhere, it should have been with the healthcare she received, as doctors should have induced labour before OP was born 20 days late. Depending on the circumstances, a caesarean may have also been a safer option. I personally don't have kids and have never had a miscarriage, so I can't even imagine how awful that would be. People don't get to choose how they feel in any given situation, so we can't really blame the mum if she felt some resentment towards OP, even though it would have been misplaced to say the least. However, people can choose how to act, despite their feelings, and OP should never have been made to feel responsible for what happened. I'm glad they never told their mum about the dog eating the brother, and I really hope they never do. It sounds like she was already devastated, and something like that could just push her over the edge, even though it was really no one's fault. This post was from 7 years ago and OP is still active on Reddit. Let's just hope they found a way to forgive themselves for everything and that their mum was able to move on from the miscarriage. The next story we'll cover is from a comment on an Unresolved Mysteries post titled, "What is your personal unresolved mystery?" It's a pretty long story, but I think it's best told in the OP's own words, so I'll read it now. This story ended up being much longer than I had originally anticipated, and I apologise for the long read. I will say that in all the years I've told this story, people usually respond. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. So I hope you take the time to enjoy it. This story occurred in the summer of 2008. I grew up in Oregon and was acquainted with the outdoors at an early age. My favourite hobby came to be hiking, particularly in areas that are either very dangerous or isolated. The health benefits of hiking were secondary to the thrills of walking the edges of exposed cliffs, being in cougar and bear territory, and knowing that I was far from help. Into the Wild was released in the fall of 2007, and I immediately fell in love. Being a high school senior, I could barely go another week living in my parents' house. The movie spoke to my sense of adventure and inspired me to hike the California portion of the Pacific Crest Trail upon graduation. I made it from the Mexico border to Northern California without much incident. I saw rattlesnakes and black bears, experienced dehydration, but nothing happened that made me fear for my life. Somewhere in the Lassen National Forest in northeastern California, I walked around a bend in the trail only to be startled by two people sitting on a rock dressed in nearly all white. Their faces were dirty, their appearance dishevelled, and the man had a long, unkempt beard. Both seemed to be in their 40s. They looked like the couple who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. What struck me as odd about the encounter was encountering anybody at all. I frequently went days without seeing a single human being. Their white clothes could be explained away by the need to escape the California summer sun. Their scruffy appearance could be explained away by the fact that most thru hikers abandon personal hygiene on the trail. After I said hello, they said nothing and simply watched me as I passed. Even that I didn't find odd. I chalked it up to them being foreign and not knowing what to say. I camped a few hundred yards off the trail that night, as I always did. Following bare precautions, I hung the leftover food I had cooked that night from a tree approximately 5 feet off the ground. Packing up camp in the morning, I noticed the food wasn't there. I immediately thought a bear had entered my campsite, and so I began to look for paw prints. I didn't find paw prints, but I did find boot prints circling the campsite, 2 pairs of them. One of those prints led right up to the rope from which the food was hanging. I thought of the couple I had passed earlier and everything clicked. I quickly packed up and left. My mind was racing the entire day, but I figured the couple was simply hungry. If they had nefarious intentions, they would have come for more than the food. Several days passed and my mind was at ease again. I'd begun to circle my campsite with sticks to wake me in the event of an intruder, animal or otherwise. I awoke in my tent one night to find the sound of those sticks crunching. I grabbed my hunting knife. I tried to relax by telling myself that in the middle of nowhere, the source of that noise is much more likely an animal than a person. Then I heard frantic whispering. It was impossible to tell which direction the voices were coming from. Being in the dark, surrounded by trees, 100 miles from the nearest city plays tricks on your senses. I debated yelling out, claiming to have a gun, but instead decided to be silent and retain the benefit of surprise. I heard footsteps circling my tent and was ready to slash at whatever opened it. But just like that, it was over. No more footsteps, no more whispering. I lied frozen awake in my tent until sunrise and opened my tent to find nobody there. The only evidence something had actually happened were the boot prints, the same as before. Several more days passed and I was now in Shasta National Forest, probably 50 to 75 miles from where I first encountered the couple. The trail became more or less a goat trail. Being on the side of a mountain and above the tree line, I could see the trail winding for miles in front of and behind me. I stopped for water in the rare shade and noticed 2 hikers miles behind me. All I could see were 2 white dots moving along the mountainside. I immediately said out loud, "F this trip is over." I pulled out my map and looked for the nearest town, which appeared to be Castella, located off I-5. The only problem was that it was 25 miles away. I hiked well into the night to gain as much ground as possible. I kept losing the trail and decided to set up camp, this time far off the trail and into the forest. I got into my tent and tried to sleep, but every little noise kept me awake. After a few hours in my tent, I heard the telltale signs of another bad night. The footsteps, the whispering, the sticks breaking. Sound travels far in absence of other sound. I knew they were close, but wasn't sure how close. All I could think was, this is effed up. This is so effed up, goddammit. Finally, a flashlight hits my tent, lights up the entire thing, and goes dark. I unzipped my tent and climbed out carrying my knife, yelling nonsense into the dark. It was sort of like that cliché scene in movies where people in the wilderness hear sticks breaking around them and the camera pans around the trees because the people have no idea which direction the sound is coming from. Then I heard footsteps running towards the tent and barely made out a figure moving in my peripheral vision. I turned and ran deep into the forest. I tripped several times and ran into several trees. After running for approximately 5 minutes, I tripped, rolled, and came to rest next to a downed tree. I got under the tree trunk and laid still. I saw the flashlight moving around in the distance. I laid under that tree for hours. I was certain they were gone, but I didn't move. Eventually, birds started chirping and I knew sunrise would come soon. Once it did, I made my way back to the trail, abandoned my campsite, and walked the rest of the distance to Castella, where the Pacific Crest Trail crosses I-5. I hitchhiked my way to the town of Mount Shasta and spoke with the police and Forest Service. They put me up in a motel for the night, and my parents drove from Oregon to pick me up the next day. I followed up with the police and Forest Service months later, who told me there had been similar reports of items disappearing from campsites throughout the surrounding national forests. However, there had been no other reports of the terrorizing that I experienced. As far as I know, nothing ever came of the couple. I quite enjoy casual hiking alone in safe locations not too far from civilization, but stories like these are exactly the reason why I'd never go into the wilderness or camp alone. Thankfully, in England and most of the other countries I've been to in the countryside, there aren't many, if any, dangerous animals like bears, but it's always a possibility that you might encounter dangerous people anywhere. I found it really creepy when OP said that the couple he passed looked like the couple who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. In case you're not familiar with the case, I'll summarise. Elizabeth was 14 years old when she was kidnapped at knife point by Brian David Mitchell in June 2002. He and his wife, Wanda Bazi, held her captive at a camp in the woods for 9 months, during which time she was repeatedly SA'd. They would often take her out and they'd all be dressed in white robes, possibly because David claimed to be a religious preacher and an angel. No one recognised Elizabeth in public because she was often made to wear a headscarf and face veil. One time David even performed a ceremony that would supposedly make him married to Elizabeth. He told her that she was the first of many virgin brides he planned to kidnap to accompany him in a battle against the Antichrist. One day in October 2002, Elizabeth's sister, who had been there when she was kidnapped, pretending to be asleep, suddenly realised that she recognised the abductor's voice as the man that the family had hired for a day to work on their roof and rake leaves. They knew him as Emmanuel, though he was of course David. This eventually led to him being caught in March 2003, and he was later sentenced to 2 life sentences in federal prison. Wanda was sentenced to 15 years and was released in 2018 after serving only 9 years. The worst part is, 3 months after her release, it was revealed that she was living in Salt Lake City near an elementary school. Thankfully, David is still in prison and has no possibility of parole. The Reddit story occurred in 2008, so there's no chance the couple OP encountered were actually David and Wanda, but the comparison alone is terrifying enough, and it certainly seems plausible that this couple were planning to kidnap OP, or even worse. I guess we don't know for sure that whoever ran towards the tent was the same couple that OP had seen earlier in the trip, but it'd be a bit of a coincidence that in an area where he would go days without seeing anyone, he'd see one notable couple, then a different couple would start stalking him. Remember, he also saw 2 hikers dressed in white walking miles behind him days later, so I think it probably was the same couple. Either way, the whole story is just so eerie, and the fact that it seems someone followed him for days, even crept around his campsite, before finally trying to attack. Interestingly, someone else commented that they may have also encountered the same couple around a year after OP's story took place, quote, "Was it a man probably in his early 30s, late 20s, a woman that looked like she was 10 years older than him? He had a beard down to the high centre of the chest, skinny, brown hat, tan backpack, handmade walking stick. She had dirty blonde or brown hair and had a bit more weight. They both wore whitish, super loose clothing, not uncommon necessarily, and they had on the most tore-up boots I had ever seen." This was before the wind turbines and such were added and nearby service roads updated. I remember because the friend I was with thought they were very creepy and she was worried about them following us or something. I waved as I went by them, but they just stared, kind of like they were sizing us up. That's all this user said about their experience. I'm guessing they never saw the couple again, thankfully. It's impossible to say whether it was the same couple OP saw, but who knows. This area is around 500 miles away from where OP was, so it is pretty far away. But if this couple just spent all their time wandering around in the wilderness, they could have ended up anywhere. What's even more interesting is that another user found an article from 2014 about a couple who had been charged with attempted harassment and attempted animal abuse after they allegedly stalked and threatened multiple people and their dogs over the course of a few years. 60-year-old David Gathright and his wife Pamela, 57, would apparently confront people while armed with a mace and stun guns. There were even some reports of victims being threatened with a handgun, such as a man named Chris Hess, who was with his wife Angela, their daughters and their dogs. Angela said, quote, "The lady leaned down with something in her hand and the dogs were interested, but it was a stun gun and she was sparking it, trying to shock them. We didn't see the gun until it came out. The guy drew down right on Chris, right in his face." In 2015, David was found guilty of unlawful use of a weapon, menacing, and pointing a firearm at another person, and was sentenced to 90 days in jail and 5 years probation. Pamela was found guilty of second-degree animal abuse and was sentenced to 5 years probation and 80 hours community service. So were David and Pamela the couple that Opie encountered? Well, Opie never noticed any weapons, and the modus operandi isn't exactly the same. David and Pamela primarily targeted mountain bikers or hikers with dogs, and often brazenly threatened them in broad daylight. It also doesn't sound like they actually stalked people. It would be a confrontation and that'd be the end of it. This all happened in Portland, Oregon, whereas Opie first saw the couple in the Lassen National Forest in California, around 400 miles away. However, the incident happened in Shasta National Forest, which he said was around 50 to 75 miles away from the first encounter, and that's in the direction of Portland where David and Pamela hung around. This couple presumably followed Opie for days, it sounds like even a couple of weeks maybe, so they clearly also went on long hiking trips. David and Pamela were caught 6 years after Opie's experience, so it's certainly not beyond the realm of possibility that they moved to a different area, which isn't actually that far away relatively. David actually said during the trial that they'd been hiking for 25 years, and I doubt they only ever hiked in the Portland area that entire time. It also makes sense that they would become more bold in their attacks over time. It's not that unbelievable that they'd start out stalking hikers and trying to scare them off by creeping around their camp at night and chasing them, then years later progress to directly confronting people with weapons. So perhaps it was David and Pamela that terrorised Opie all those years ago, or maybe it was a totally different couple who are still out there to this day. Opie did say that police had other reports of items disappearing from campsites, but not of stalking and chasing like he experienced. But was that because he was the only one, or have the others not lived to tell the tale? The final story we'll cover is from June 2016. I couldn't find the original post on Reddit. It was posted to Imgur, but the story is kinda hard to follow if I just read it directly, because some of the information is also in the comments, so I'll just summarise. Opie lives alone in a pretty big house. In her bedroom, there's a door that leads outside to a small porch, and one day she was sweeping the floor in this area when she found a tooth in front of the door. She often sweeps the floors because they show every speck of dirt, so it sounds unlikely that the tooth had been there for long and she hadn't seen it. She checked her own teeth to make sure it wasn't one of hers that had dropped out without her realising, and it wasn't. There were a number of explanations suggested in the comments, ranging from ghosts and witchcraft to more grounded possibilities like Opie having a pet that brought the tooth in from outside. And by far the creepiest suggestion, that someone was secretly living in her attic. She decided to go check it out herself, since she'd have to wait a long time for anyone else to get there, and she noticed what appeared to be fingerprints on the opening of the attic. She updated the post after she looked up there, quote, "I can't see much up there, but there are things laying about. Not a person as far as I can see. Going to get a taller ladder and a bigger flashlight. And FYI, I am in law enforcement, but for Game and Fish Commission. Fully trained, but a smallish woman in the middle of nowhere nonetheless. Update 3. Someone has indeed been in my attic, but they are not there now. Things found. 8 beer huggers, some of my personal items, a whole pile of change and a $20 bill. Other things I won't mention right now. Colleagues are here, we'll update more later. Thanks for making me smile, guys. OP didn't specify at that point what the other things she found were, but most of the commenters believed they were some kind of inappropriate, not safe for work items, so to speak, and that turned out to be the case, but we'll get onto that soon. So the police arrived, dusted for fingerprints, and took the items from the attic. OP said, "I'm beginning to calm down and process it. It looks like someone has occasionally visited up there for over a very long period of time. I'm going to leave the house now and go ride trails. I will be locking my door from now on and have new locks installed just to be safe." Another update read, "Today I learned I have a stalker that sits in my attic when I'm home. No, I don't lock my doors unless I'm inside sleeping because I live in a community of about 400 people with only a post office. It's normal here. I do, however, always keep my bedroom patio door locked. I will now be locking all doors. I've thought of robbers in the past, but a locked door is not going to stop someone from breaking in if they really want to. I don't know how the tooth that started this even fits in. It's not in the path that would lead to the attic. The only reason I even thought of or looked at my attic was because of that top comment that made me stop dead in my tracks. I've always been a little scared of the attic. I know the sheriff here and he feels it's someone that knows me. I don't want to say what was up there. It's awful." The next update finally revealed what the other things were that OP found in the attic. Quote, "I went through the safe thing. I've been on here that long. I get the curiosity, and I'm going to say just a few of the things because I don't want to leave you sick effers hanging. But you know those gigantic pickle jars, the kind at concession stands where you buy just one out of? Well, there was 2 of those up there. He had been collecting his personal, well, hell, his in it. I did not take a picture of it and it made me vomit. There were thousands of tissues, maroon socks, towelettes and such for wiping strewn about the attic. There were clothes of mine that had gone missing over a year ago. There were small toys, like a plastic butterfly and a bobblehead wooden turtle. There were the beer huggies and some black and pink straps with Velcro on the ends. Lots of random stuff. I hope this satisfies some of your curiosity. I didn't mean to leave anyone hanging. I've not slept or eaten or been home much since this happened. I've received 0 updates. I love you guys. I'm leaving for a week of camping and won't be home. There are cameras being installed. We will see." So that's absolutely terrifying and sickening. I honestly admire OP for checking it out herself in the first place before calling the police. If I found a random tooth in my house, then posted online and people suggested someone was living in my attic, I'd be out of there before you could say cum jar. There was one final short update in which OP revealed who the stalker turned out to be. Quote, "Is my 70-something, married forever to the same woman, church deacon, father of 4, grandfather to 6, pillar of the community, neighbour. I'm away but have received the call." I really feel sorry for this guy's wife. What an awful thing to find out about the man you've been married to for most of your life. It just goes to show that even the people who seem the most innocent can still be hiding dark secrets and doing crazy things like this. There were no more updates, so I have no idea if he got prosecuted for this. I really hope he did. What's strange about this story is that OP discovered there was someone creeping in her attic after she found a random tooth, but the tooth itself is still a mystery. Whose was it and where did it come from? She said that it wasn't on the pathway to the attic, but the man had stolen some of her clothes, so it sounds like he had wandered around the house at some point. But it doesn't exactly look like a 70-plus-year-old man's tooth, and even if it was his, how did it just drop out of his mouth without him realising? There was some speculation in the comments that this might be a child's tooth, which is obviously so much creepier. A few people claiming to be dentists and dental assistants said that they were sure it was a baby tooth rather than an adult tooth. OP did say the man in the attic had 6 grandchildren, so it's possible that it belonged to one of them, but why on earth would he be carrying around his grandchild's tooth? I mean, then again, the guy was hiding out in OP's attic doing inappropriate things, so I guess this wouldn't be much more shocking. I really can't think how else it would have got there, and I couldn't find any other updates, so I guess OP never figured out the tooth either. On a final, brighter note though, she did make another post a few months later saying that after the original tooth post, she met a guy on Imgur and got to know him, then they flew to meet each other. They visited 3 countries and planned to move in together the following year, so at least something good came out of this awful situation. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, plus any topics you might like me to cover in the future. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my Ko-fi members and channel members whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in a new video.